Sit down, cross your legs, button up your shirt, hide your bra straps. You can't go out like that. Don't play in the sun. You must know how to cook. Be nice and greet the guests. Growing up in India, there was almost always a different set of do's and don'ts for girls compared to boys. I come from a history where a menstruating woman entering a temple can cause riots, where government officials openly cite tight jeans as a reason for rape, and where the safety of cows, sacred religious symbols, is prioritized over the safety of women. I was born and raised in a multi-generational family home in an industrial neighborhood in New Delhi. Our home was above my grandfather's factory, which made auto parts for trucks. As a kid, I loved this space. I am told that as a baby, when I couldn't fall asleep, my parents or my aunts and uncles would take my stroller down to the factory, where the gentle hum of the machinery during the night shift would lull me to sleep. As I grew, I explored the dark corridors of this factory. I marveled at a hidden Dexter-like chemistry lab in there, and I felt awe when I saw sparks flying during the welding process. My safety was always ensured, but this factory was also my playground. The day I began showing visible signs of puberty, my visits to the factory stopped abruptly. I only realized it much later, but all the workers downstairs were men. Not a single woman worked at the factory floor. As I grew and I went to design school, I began visualizing my frustrations that surrounded gender norms in India. I participated in a poster-making workshop organized by Poster for Tomorrow with the context of balancing genders in the Indian context. In the first poster, I wanted to comment on the commoditization of women during marriages. When a new bride enters the home of her in-laws, it is said that ghar mein Lakshmi aayi hai, or that a goddess has entered the home. Yet, under the guise of tradition, arranged marriages continue to be negotiated around customs of dowry. It is expected that the woman's family will pay for the wedding. The bride's family gives gifts, money, or even property to seal this alliance. Marital rape continues to be decriminalized in India, and forced sexual acts within a marriage are only considered to be a crime if the bride is below 18 years of age. That is, if she is a child. In the second poster, I wanted to tackle the myths and the taboos that surround menstruation, a common bodily function like circulation or digestion, except that it is gendered. I reference the Hindu goddess of knowledge, Saraswati, and the day that I shared this poster online, someone, a man, a religious leader of a local right-wing group, filed a police complaint against me. He demanded that I apologize. He urged local authorities to arrest me, and he threatened that this poster had the ability to cause communal riots. The irony is that we have temples that are dedicated to the worship of menstruation and fertility. We bow and we pray to the divine feminine. But when it comes to real women, women face restrictions on what they can touch, what they can eat, and where they can be. Women are denied entry to temples when they are menstruating, and they are said to be unclean and impure. This experience with this religious godman taught me that art is powerful and that there are huge implications to sharing art in public. My primary practice as an illustrator is that I draw on location. I carry my sketchbook and I go to public places and I draw people and I draw places. Often I rely on public transport, and back in Delhi, It was the New Delhi metro, which is well connected and crowded. In peak hours, if you accidentally lose your footing, there isn't even enough space to put your foot back down. In a sea of people, from where and when a creepy hand arrives, you can't really tell. All you will feel is a pinch, a grope, or a squeeze. The New Delhi government sought to fix this by adding 2 women-only carriages to each train. As of just a couple of years ago, there was a proposal for pink parks or gendered green spaces across the city solely dedicated to women so that they would not be harassed by men. In India and in many, many countries all over the world, governments resort to segregation to ensure our safety. They tell us what a woman's place is. When you grow up in an environment like this, it becomes the norm for you to have to alter your own thoughts and behaviors to feel safe, rather than hoping for an actual safer environment around you. And so, when I moved to the US for my master's in illustration, I wondered what the constructs would be in this new cultural context. As part of a student project at SVA, I began exploring an inkling of an idea. I wanted to know how women in other parts of the world experience gender norms. So I put a question out there on the internet. What would you do if you were a man for a day? And soon enough, I realized that social media, which is where I shared this, is its own kind of echo chamber. I was limited by my outreach, and I wanted a more diverse set of responses. I realized that I was in the midst of an international community. So I started passing handouts to fellow students at SVA. I asked them only to share their gendered identity and their nationality. And I threw in another question in the mix. I asked, what would you do if you were a woman for a day? I thought I would question the notion of binaries and contrast these responses to each other. I put about 70 surveys out there, and I collected responses from India, US, China, Japan, Brazil, Argentina, and Korea. And as the responses came in, I started to sketch them out. Here are some of my investigations to the question, what would you do if you were a man for a day? Some people said, I would walk short distances at night without taking cabs. I'd walk with half the amount of fear. I would go for one of those all-night Qawwali sessions at Nizamuddin without being worried about my safety, and I'd visit the innermost chamber of the shrine. In this context, Qawwali is a type of devotional music that runs late into the night, and the innermost chamber of the Sufi saint's tomb is a space that's reserved only for men. Somebody else said, I would spend all day outdoors without having to worry if there's a decent toilet nearby. Somebody said, I'd hate being a man for even 5 minutes. The future is female. Someone said, I wouldn't get married as early as I did. I'd smoke without judgment at a roadside stall. And someone said, nothing. I do whatever I do now. I don't do anything to fit into my gender. These were some of the responses to the question, what would you do if you were a woman for a day? I would like to experience the gaze of men in a crowded city. I want to know what it's like to experience a woman's orgasm. I'd try all the different clothes out there. I think options for men are really limited. I'm super interested in anatomy, so I'd probably explore my body. I want to breastfeed to know the feeling. I would get pregnant and give birth. Based on this admittedly small survey, I realized that there was a clear dichotomy in the responses that I received. Men wanted to experience the physical aspect of being a woman, whereas most women yearned for the basic freedom to all the things that men can do without feeling restricted and without feeling fear of violence. Naturally, I related to the women's responses. I couldn't imagine, and neither did I want to, draw out the men's responses. And that's the beauty of a student project. To a great degree, you get to call the shots. So I decided to illustrate some of the women's responses in a book that I came to call Unladylike. As a student trying to hone her anatomy drawing skills, gathering references became pretty interesting. I looked through the internet, I looked through the library, I looked through magazines, but the majority of the images that I found felt too airbrushed or too polished, or they carried a certain gaze. I wanted to draw real women, not celebrities. So again, I decided to crowdsource my models. I reached out to friends and family and asked if they were willing to lend their faces and their bodies for this project. I decided to use the metaphor of a vase to reinforce the theme of constraint. And as I put pen to paper and began visualizing women breaking out of norms, it felt really cool to see my friends' bodies and their gazes staring back defiantly at me. Here are some of the responses that made it to my final student project. I would not have children, and I would be more than a vessel. I would burp, fart, and snore in public. I would swim freely. I would travel all across India by trains solo. I would grow. I would take a lot of pictures with my cats and not be called a crazy cat lady. I would sit like a king. It's been quite a while since I did this project as a student, and much has happened in the world since then. When I reflect back, I realize that knowingly, unknowingly, many of the responses that came to me, or the ones that I chose to represent, ended up mirroring my own upbringing in a middle-class Indian environment. These are representative of only a small range of female experiences. My survey did not explicitly include perspectives from the intersection of caste, class, other religions, physical ability, or even deeper investigations into gender identity and sexual orientation. All the women in these illustrations look femme, and they are referenced largely from Indian women. My own experiences of feeling looked at, of feeling fearful, or feeling restrained are 100% valid, but they're only part of a much bigger set of stories. I chose to highlight things like clothing and used nudity as a symbol of freedom. And for many women from different socioeconomic backgrounds, these freedoms might be trivial in comparison to their everyday experiences around gender-based violence or access to healthcare and education. Here we are. It's March 2025, and in the United States, we're seeing diversity programs being cut across the board. We are seeing gender identity being legally denied, and abortion rights are disappearing. We are watching our governments erase the very conversations that allow us to grow. It felt really hard to acknowledge my own blind spots when I reflected back at this project. I had missed out on a lot of things. But if I don't reflect back and if I don't confront my own biases, I risk being stagnant and I risk disconnecting myself from the rest of the world. We know that art is powerful. Art can make us feel things. And our role as artists is to notice, it's to observe, and it's to question what we see in front of us. What do I see in front of me? Why do I see it? And what if it looked different? Art grants us the permission, the autonomy, and the freedom to imagine a picture which doesn't yet exist. Like any other freedom, this is not without responsibility. As emerging artists or as students, we often draw upon our personal narratives. We work from what we've been through and what we've known. This is important, and it's a vital part of the process. It allows us to identify and connect with the things that we truly care about. But as we grow, the challenge is to push beyond. When we present a limited point of view as a universal point of view, we risk painting an incomplete picture. And so, we must continually ask ourselves, what are the stories we tell? What stories remain untold? And how can we take the collective responsibility to broaden our points of view? Thank you.